Vibe coding a web application, meaning writing the whole web app using AI, is not a joke anymore because recently models as well as tooling has become super good and you can basically create beautiful looking web applications without a web developer background within minutes. And the good thing is, with Databricks apps, you can now build data and AI powered applications directly within Databricks with easy access to all of your data that anyways sits within Databricks. However, probably everyone who has tried to vibe code a Databricks app or to vibe code any other web application has likely run into several problems. So things that I encounter often is your app runs super smoothly locally, but then once you deploy it, you run into several errors. And also sometimes you run into this endless error loop and you cannot properly debug your code. And probably the biggest drawback that I see is that often the code that is generated, especially if it's generated from scratch, does not have a proper structure and is not necessarily built on the most up-to-date frameworks and toolings, and you run into problems once you try to extend and scale your application. That's why in this video I want to show you how I vibe code a Databricks app, making use of recent frameworks that were introduced as well as the newest version of Cursor, where I show you end-to-end how I set it up, what my prompts are, what models I use, and how my end-to-end workflow looks like to then deploy a good-looking Databricks app that also has some decent code behind it. By the end of this video, we will build a Databricks app that will visualize some sensor data in near real time, also leveraging Lakebase under the hood, and it will also provide a natural language interface powered by Genie to chat with our data within the app. Let's get right into it. Alright, and our journey for a proper Databricks app does not start in Databricks or in Cursor. Actually, I start all of my new Databricks apps projects by cloning this Databricks solution repository called APX. APX is basically a toolkit which was implemented by one of my colleagues. So shoutouts to Ivan Trusov for creating this. And as it's basically indicating here, it bundles together a set of tools and libraries to already have a proper framework for a good working Databricks app. What you should try to avoid is just starting from scratch and basically let AI implement the basic framework and everything around it for you. Instead, if you use this toolkit here, it will already give you a proper modern base structure. That means it will use modern UI libraries. In this case, it's using ShadCN and Tailwind. It will have a properly set up fast API backend. It will use UV and Bun for proper dependency management. So basically lots of different libraries and components stitched together, put into this framework, so that once you start from this, you get a properly set up framework already and you don't need to start from scratch. And this is already reducing many errors that you would run into when you set it up basically from scratch. Additionally, you will see in a second, it is optimized for vibe coding, meaning it has already some pre-configured cursor rules that will be used. It will right away connect cursor to some MCP servers to make your vibe coding experience more reliable. So this is just a super nice starting point. I cannot go into all of the details, but I will link the repository in the description so you can have a look yourself and just follow the instructions, which is also what we are going to do next. So now I am in Cursor. This is my preferred editor for vibe coding. And the first thing I will do is I created a new folder here and I will now install here this APX framework. For this, I will execute this command right here. All right, and then I'm guided through a couple of questions. So I provide the name of my app here. I call it Sensor Magic. Then it's asking me if I want to build a essential or a stateful app. For a stateful app, it will additionally create for me a lake-based database, and we're going to use that. Next, for the profile, and this is referring to the Databricks profile. So ideally, you have already authenticated against the Databricks CLI and created the profile, and this is what you can specify here, so that once we deploy resources to Databricks, it is using this profile. And then around AI assistant rules. So this is what I meant earlier, that there are even some cursor rules already pre-implemented for us. And we definitely want to use that. And here we are specifying that we are using cursor for this project. We do not need a sidebar. And there we go. Now the framework is getting built for us. Basically, the project is being set up. And then after a couple of seconds, we see these two pop-ups here. So we see that two MCP servers were detected, and I would like to enable both of them. And there we go. So if we go to the editor now and we show the files, we see from our initially empty project, we have now a bunch of different files. And I don't want to go into all of the details, but essentially you have your source folder here with the backend and UI code, and you see already pre-implemented files such as a logger. We have some dependency management here. We have some utils pre-implemented here. And this is what I meant with we start already with a proper foundation, and then we build with our prompts on top of that. Apart from these components here, we have two more things that we would like to look into. So first of all, we also have a Databricks.yaml, and this is a Databricks asset bundle. For those of you not familiar, Databricks asset bundles is the preferred way to deploy non-static resources that you wouldn't like to deploy with Terraform, such as jobs, such as also Databricks apps here. And you see that already in this case, as we chose to have a stateful app, it would also create a database for us. In our case, we will already start with a pre-created database, so we don't need this part right here. And also our instance is called slightly different. So if you were following one of the previous videos, you would see that this is called actually Sensor Project Lakebase. And the rest can stay as is. And then there is one more thing that we would like to look into. First of all, we have a couple of MCP servers installed here. And I see we have this one twice and this one with an error, so we will remove those. So we have the chat CN MCP server, which will give our AI assistant the power to execute all of these functions here coming from the MCP server to give us back all the information that we need around the UI components that do exist. And we have the APX one as well, which has some pre-configured functions for us. And then the rules that I was referring to, you see that we have some project rules here defined. And this also gives our AI assistant already a proper framework around what are do's, what are don'ts, how do I go about package management, how do I structure my project, what are some general front-end rules like proper routing, data fetching, some patterns, what are the development commands, so how do I stop my server, how do I start it, and all of this is already pre-set for us. And this is super valuable because you don't need to come up with all of this yourself, but all projects would need something like this to properly vibe code and to guide the LLMs a bit with all of these rules that we give to them. All right, now let's get started and build our app. And the way I do it typically is with this new agents UI coming with Cursor 2.0. Typically, I create new agents if I am implementing different features, right? So if you create a new agent, you get a new context there. So I wouldn't do everything within one agent. I do now, for example, the initial setup with one of the agents. But then if I start to add more and more features, I typically create new agents for these new features. And then if it comes to these two settings here, you see here we can select between agent, plan, and ask. And this basically applies to any app you vibe code, not specifically to Databricks apps only. But the way I do it, most of the time, especially if I start with the initial prompt, I start with the planning mode because this will make sure that the AI behind it properly thinks through what needs to be done instead of just directly going to execution mode. And for this, to be honest, I did not test the plan yet with the new Opus model, but so far what I have done is I used GPT for planning and I used the Claude models for the actual execution in the agent mode, right? So I would use the new Opus 4.5 as an agent, but for planning, I mostly still rely on the GPT models. Okay, now I type my prompt right over here and I specify all of that text here. Essentially, I'm saying I want to create an app to visualize my sensor data. I also described that it should start with mocking the backend data, right? So that for the local deployment, we get at least some data visualized. Later, we will change it to use proper data from Lakebase. And I'm describing how my app should look like. So in this case, I want 3 boxes showing the average temperature, humidity, of the last 10 minutes, last hour, and daily average. And then below, I want to have 2 graphs, which automatically refresh every half a second. I describe where to get this data from, and I do not need some kind of pre-screen. I just want to directly go into this UI here. I could even make this way more detailed. For now, let's just take this as that, and let's start the planning, and let's see what the GPT model comes up with for this app. And you see, as we are going in planning mode, it does not go ahead and directly create everything. It is actually asking us follow-up questions that it needs to have clarified before actually doing anything here. So what I will do now, I will go ahead and answer all of these questions right here by just selecting basically what I need. So for number 1, it is asking about how my data is already stored and if I already have maybe a database, and I will let it know I already have a Lakebase database called Sensor Project Lakebase, and I will also even give some more information about my table that already exists there as well. So if you have been watching the previous videos, I already created a Lakebase table where I stream some sensor data in, and I would like this app to use exactly this table. So I am telling it I have already a table with this name right here, and it has the following definition. And I even pasted the create table statement that I executed earlier. For the chat, it is asking me how I would like to do this. For now, I wanted to just mock it. For now, mock it. Later, we will use the Genie API. And that's it. And I give it back to the LLM. And let's see how it plans the next moves. And there we go. A plan is built for us how to design this application. And it will take into consideration my current baseline code that I got from the APX installation. And now it will describe me exactly how it will build it. And I can review this plan now and then let it build afterwards. So this is what I do now. I spend a couple of minutes to go through this plan and to decide if it makes sense for me or if I want to tweak a couple of things for now. And then I will build it. Cool, that looks good to me. And by the way, there is one more thing that I, in the meantime, configured here. Because I also want to use the new built-in browser tooling of the new cursor version. And here I enabled this and I put browser tab here. So we can now build this and see it right in cursor and also make adjustments right in cursor by pointing to what we would like to have adjusted. So now I select the Opus model in my case and I click on build plan. Now you see it has successfully built the first version, and now it even uses the built-in browser functionality to test things out in the UI itself, right? So it opened the app that it first deployed locally, and now it's even testing, and I don't have to do anything, right? I'm just watching what AI is doing here, basically. So it is seeing that we have some error messages here. It's failed to allow the sensor overview. Then it's fixing, it's rechecking. Now it asks me to restart it, basically. I give it the permissions to do so. Now it's restarting the server. It will look at it again and it will see if still the error is there or not, basically. You see connection failed. It's identifying, okay, it's not loading currently. It tries to fix it. It identifies the frontend is at another port now. It again opens it right here. Still, you see some errors that occur. It's also, by the way, checking the logs. So it's not only visually looking at the app, it checks the actual logs to see what might be the problem why it is not loading. Here, for example, it's now executing the run APX dev logs. And this was one of the rules that were provided in our rule stack. And now there you go. We see already the graphs are loading now. Let's see if AI is happy or not. We see still at the top, there is an error code. So probably it will still try to fix that now. But at least the graphs are already loading now and they look pretty good. And then this was fixed here as well. Awesome. It's running some browser actions. You see it's like trying to click around and test the things out. It's still not happy with a few things. Maybe something in the logs is still indicating some problems here. And there we go. Looks like AI is happy. So it's saying the dashboard looks beautiful. Now it's even testing the chat feature. So it's really going there and checking the current screen, how it looks like, and tries to fix everything. So basically a lot of the manual things that you had to take care of earlier by like screenshotting your web application or by giving it the logs, it's doing all of that automatically because it has this built-in browser feature. It has access to the logs. So it is debugging and fixing everything by itself. And I can just watch basically how the magic is happening. Now it looks like all tests have been passed. So it is loading the content, taking a final screenshot, taking a look at the screenshot, and it comes to the conclusion the dashboard works beautifully. So I already see a couple of things before I deploy this now into my Databricks app that I would like to adjust here. And the way I would do that here is I would first of all create a new agent, right? So I would not directly use this existing agent that did already all of this heavy lifting stuff. Instead, I would just use this new one here. And first thing that I would like to change is that I would like to have this assistant here only as a pop-up, right? If I click on an icon here, so it does not have to be there continuously. And another thing that I would like to fix is that this dashboard is like jumping so much, even though the temperature changes of the mock data are super small. So to fix that, I open a new agent. And then what I can do now, I can also use this new browser feature of cursor. And I can click here on select element. And I can just select my whole chat interface here that I would like to change, right? And as this is not super complicated, I will go ahead directly with the Opus model. I will not have a planning step before. I want this to be a pop-up, make it a round icon. It will open if I click into it. And then these two graphs should take the whole width. I execute it. And then let's see what AI is doing for us here to fix that. And there we go. So now we see already we have this icon here that we can pop up. It is testing the changes as well again itself. It makes a screenshot of the browser actually to also check it visually, not only in the logs. It's opening the chat window by itself, so I didn't click anywhere. And it is happy with the results. I could, by the way, always check what it is doing, right? In this case, I'm just accepting it all, but I could always like go in the actual code, see what was added here, check if it makes sense. Probably I would also do this to at least some extent, especially if I do some critical adjustments. But for now, I am a true vibe coder and I just accept everything that comes in here. By the way, it also added like this functionality to switch between light mode and dark mode, which I also like a lot. Now let me change the other thing that I mentioned. So what I do not like yet is that these two graphs, they are a bit too hectic for me. So I described that I don't like that these graphs are behaving like this. I want to make it a bit more smooth for especially smaller changes. So I've give that as a feedback together with pointing to these two graphs here. Now again, the other agent is trying to understand the context and it is planning the next moves and will do then adjustments again for us and test it out. This time I'm not super happy with the results, so it still looks not so smooth. So I will give it this feedback now. Okay, looks like it found the issue. So it seems like for the mock data implementation, it's every half a second generating a completely new graph instead of only generating the new data basically. And this looks way, way better here. So this is exactly how I envisioned it to look like. So now every half a second, it is basically only showing the new data coming in here much more smoothly. So before I deploy now to a Databricks app, let me actually ask it a question. So this is the third option that we can also select here. For this, I can create a new agent and I ask it. So I'm curious if it actually already implemented also the prod version of using like the real lake-based data once I deploy into a proper Databricks app, or if it's still always like using mock data. Now it's scanning the code and trying to give me an answer for that. Okay, so now it's explaining to me without me having to scan all of the code. There is an environment variable use mock data, and I need to set in my Databricks app configurations the use mock data to false, and then it will actually connect to Lakebase. Okay, that sounds good. Now I have one more follow-up question. So I would like to know, how do we plan to authenticate against the database? So I will ask, how does authentication to Lakebase work? To also make sure this is properly set up using a secure setup. And I get a response back here with the information that it is using OAuth access tokens. Even though it looked good, to be on the safe side, I will use the Databricks apps cookbook, and this is essentially a collection of lots of very useful recipes for common scenarios. So I highly recommend this. I will also put a link to the cookbook into the description. And what we have here is we have a recipe for connecting Fast API to Lakebase. And what I can do is I can just copy that code. I will go over to Cursor and then I will tell it to compare this implementation with what I just copy pasted. There you go. So this is like how I typically work. So if I know already some critical points of the application where I already have like some code snippets or I already have like the best practice code, I will just give it to the AI directly. And there you see already it identified quite a lot of gaps compared to my best practice implementation. So now it will go ahead and refactor the actual code. Cool, the changes were implemented. Now I can finally go ahead and deploy this app to a Databricks app to see if it actually works there as well. For this, again, I open a new agent in the agent mode using the Opus model. And then all I'm going to specify is deploy this as an actual Databricks app. Make sure to use actual lake-based data instead of mock data. Now we see the Databricks bundle deploy command is being executed. So it's actually trying now to deploy the app, but it's a bit confused with the profiles. And now it picks up the right profile here. All right, now the app is successfully deployed. I was running into some issues because I already deployed this earlier and it got confused a bit with the Terraform state, but eventually it figured it out. And now let's check what is there in Databricks. For this, let me switch back over here and then I filter by my apps and I see here this Sensor Magic V2 right here. I still need to start it, right? So this did not happen yet. I could also prompt my agent now to do so, but I will just do it from the UI. And this takes a couple of minutes and then we will see if it will work out of the box or we will need to further iterate with our vibe coding approach to make it work. And while we wait, we see already here that an app resource has been created referencing our database here with the can connect and create. We can click into this Lakebase project here. So this is the one we created in one of the earlier parts here. And this is the one that stores our sensor data. And If we go into the permissions here, we see here that a role has been added. And this is actually the service principal of my app here. You see it also here. This is like the ID of my app. And this matches what I see right here. And yeah, for now, let's just give also this user some more permissions. Now the app started and I can deploy it from here, but I would like my agent to do that because as we further iterate, I would also like the agent to deploy the app. So I'm telling it now the bundle was deployed and the app started. Please deploy the actual app now. Now it's executing the Databricks app deploy command here. All right, now we refresh this right here and we see our app is actually running. So we can click into it and it does not work. All right, how do we fix it now, right? So there are different ways to do that within Databricks. So I would typically look into the logs now and try to understand what the problem really is here. But what I can also do is I can give my agent access to all of these logs here. And this is something that was just very recently added to the Databricks SDK to easily read from the log files. And this is not yet built into my APX framework as a rule, for example. So I will just open a new agent here. And as this is so brand new, I will actually give it the exact command that needs to be run. For everyone watching this video, I would just add that also to the rules of the cursor setup. So I'm saying the deployed app does not work. Check logs using Databricks apps logs, and then the app name, and then the profile. Saying the issue is clear from the logs. There is a module not found exception. Therefore, it's rechecking if everything is configured as expected. And it figured out this needed file landed somehow in the git ignore. So now it will remove it from there and probably redeploy the application. And for that, I can actually go back to my agent that I used earlier to already deploy and just tell it to please redeploy. So now I can use one agent actually for deployment that already successfully deployed my app once. And then I can use the other app to troubleshoot that already knows how to read in the log information. So it's saying the redeployment was successful. So let's check it out. And we see it was just redeployed a couple of seconds ago, but it still does not work. So I going back to my agent, telling it it still does not work. Check the logs. And this is how it works, right? I don't want to make any false impressions here. So it's always like a back and forth. Sometimes you run into those errors that take a while to debug, but it's important that you know how to handle it. You give the agent access to your logs. It will try things out. It will redeploy. It will see if it worked successfully afterwards or not, right? And this is the way you typically work in this motion. Now at least it claims that my wheel includes this file that I need. Next error identified. Now the validate DB seems not to work. And this is a problem that could not be catched locally because now it tries to make the connection to the database actually. So we are on the right track here. So now it thinks it's super smart. It came to the conclusion that the easiest fix is just also to use mock data within the Databricks app. And now the deployment was therefore successful. It also checks the logs now again. And the app is now running, but it's using mock data. We will fix that in a second, but maybe let's have a look into the app. And we see indeed it was deployed now. Into a Databricks app, right? So here we are not operating locally anymore. We are actually in our Databricks app, but it's still not pulling our actual data because our AI was running there into issues and thought it's easier to just also use mock data and prod. But that is not what we want, so let's fix that. I want to use lake-based data and prod and only mock data locally. Please try to fix my database issue. Now it's rebuilding, and we see again also our local app started to work again properly. All right, at least my agent claims that the database connection is now working successfully. So let's have a look. We are updating it. We see that the temperature is stale here, and this is actually valid because the temperature in my room does not change that much. So what I can do now to test the dashboarding functionality is the following, because this app, if you have not been watching the previous parts, is actually connected to Lakebase, and the data lands into Lakebase from my real physical temperature sensor that I have right next to me, which is connected to a Raspberry Pi. So what I can do now is I can put my fingers onto the sensor right here. And as you can see, already something happens within the dashboard, and temperature should also increase now drastically. And there we go. So you see it's like a couple of seconds of delay, but it's all working. So my real-time dashboard is actually capturing my real data that is fed into Lakebase. So this part is now already working super good. Cool. And all of that vibe coded within a couple of minutes using our cursor setup. And I also like how it's now very smoothly showing the recent updates on the dashboard. Cool. So now that this is working, we can basically tackle the chat interface here. And let's actually have a look how it is currently being implemented. So as I did not give it any proper instructions yet to use Genie, I would expect this to not work yet. So if I'm asking like, how many spikes did I have in the last 10 minutes? It looks like it's just giving me a generic answer about the current readings here, right? So it's not really using Genie yet to query our data. And also I see here it's a bit buggy that I cannot ask any follow-up questions. So I need to probably to reopen it, and only then I can ask follow-up questions. So let's fix that. Let's make our chat actually smart, and let's make it query our Genie space that we have set up beforehand. Now back in Cursor, I open a new agent. I start in planning mode. I select GPT 5.0. And now I describe basically what I would like to do. And for this, I define my prompt the following. Please properly implement the chat interface now. Earlier, you just mocked it. I want you to query a Genie space on Databricks. And for this, you can use the following example. And here again, I follow a similar approach as I was earlier with the OAuth configuration, because there is this Git repository that is already doing exactly what we want to do. So it's showing an example of a Databricks Genie API integration in a Databricks app. And because this work is already done here, the URL, I will just copy the URL of this Git repository, and then I will just paste it here. And then I can also specify you can clone it and investigate the implementation logic. Also make sure to add the permissions for the Genie space as an app resource. And that sounds good. So let's see how the plan will look like now. Now it's asking some valid questions like what Genie space should actually be used. And here I want to use an existing one. And it's even asking me about conversation state. So this is an interesting one because I don't want to keep it too complex for this demo here. I will just make it stateless so that each question is handled as an independent query. But if I would implement this for a production use case, probably a conversation state would make a lot of sense. And this is also something that I could, for example, store in Lakebase. Now it comes up with a plan, and this looks all good to me. One thing I'm curious about is which Genie space it plans to use, because I did not provide the name yet. So I will just be proactive this time and specify it here. So I'm saying build it. By the way, my Genie space is called my sensor agent with the following URL. And then I change it back here to agent and opus. And let's see what happened. So we're opening the dev UI and see that currently it's having some issues, but I would expect the AI to figure this out now itself again, how to fix it. And it's already looking at the logs here. So it's trying to submit now the question also locally, but this is actually not what I want. So I just stop it here and then I tell it locally it is fine to not call the actual Genie space. So I'm just saying it can give like a static response back, like locally Genie does not work. So that we can at least see how the UI behaves, but we don't actually test the Genie integration yet. This we will only check once we deploy it into a Databricks app again. Now let's test it if it actually works. And there we go. So this is what we expected. So next we can actually deploy it and test in the proper Databricks app. I will go back to my agent that I already used previously to deploy to Databricks. So I can tell it redeploy the latest version. Looks like it's redeployed. So let's have a look. All right. So I needed to fix a few permission things on the SQL warehouse as well as on the tables, but now it was redeployed and now we should be good to go. So let's ask again, how many spikes did occur in the last 3 hours? Now we see it is thinking. I would assume it's calling the Genie space here, and we get the answer of 3. Cool. And then maybe what is actually a spike, and then we get a spike is defined as a temperature above 25 degrees and below 20 degrees. Cool, so it all works as expected. We have our live temperature and humidity dashboard up and running. We even have a chat interface now to ask further analytical questions. And all of that was web coded super fast, just using Cursor, using APX as a framework, as well as using some best practices here and there, such as cursor rules and extracting the Databricks logs. I hope that was helpful. Also, let me know in the comments how your current web coding setup looks like. Maybe I missed something, or you can give me a hint where to improve on this workflow. And yeah, thanks for watching. I see you in the next video.